In 1974, a fierce power struggle between the two largest mafia organizations in Japan took place. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. In the end, the leader of the Yamaguchi gang lost power and had to give up his life. The boss of the Sumiyoshi gang was arrested by the police. He would certainly have to spend the rest of his life in prison. After this massacre, the underworld was temporarily peaceful for a short time, but all that peace was only to welcome an even more fierce reign of blood. 14 years later, the Yamaguchi gang began planning to challenge the Sumiyoshi gang to avenge the old grudge. They took a junior member of the Sumiyoshi gang named Katsuya to a pig pen to torture him. In an extremely barbaric manner. After that, his eyes were gouged out and buried on a deserted island that no one knew about. 2 months passed, and Katsuya's sister saw that he had not returned, so she immediately went to the police station to report the case. A police officer named Ogami was in charge of this case. It was not known how he took the statement, but when the two of them left the interrogation room, their clothes were messy and their faces were haggard, as if they had just done something shady in broad daylight. He acted more like a thug than a police officer. However, Ogami was a kind and cruel person that everyone was afraid of. The words he said were also feared by the mafia gangs. It could be said that he was the one who stood in the middle to balance the underworld. This prevented the gangs from breaking out into bloody wars that would cause suffering to the people. However, in order to do that, Ogami also got involved in many illegal acts during the course of his mission. The police chief saw this and sent a new soldier named Hyoka to join Ogami in solving the case. Hyoka pretended to follow Ogami as a colleague and learn, but in reality, the chief wanted Hyoka to collect evidence of Ogami's crimes with the gangsters, because the chief wanted to put Ogami in jail. According to Ogami's judgment, if someone from the Sumiyoshi gang died, the culprit could only be the Yamaguchi gang. That's why Ogami took Hyoka to an internet cafe. This was where the juniors of the four Yamaguchi gang often went to play games. Ogami wanted to get information from this fat guy, so he told Hyoka to provoke the fat guy. Then they used the excuse to interrogate him. Hyoka asked why Ogami didn't do it. Ogami answered frankly that it was because he was Hyoka's superior.
わしの知ったことじゃないわ。警察だ！
When the fat man saw Ogami, he quickly and respectfully called him boss. Ogami was very calm. Then Ogami threatened that if the fat man intentionally used a knife to injure and assault the police, Ogami would give him 10 years in prison. Hearing this, the fat man was immediately scared. Seeing that the opportunity had come, Ogami immediately asked if he knew where Katsuya of the Sumiyoshi gang was. The fat man's expression immediately changed and said that he was willing to accept 10 years or 2 years in prison. Then he volunteered to let Hyoka handcuff him. Ogami knew that he could not get any information, so he left. The fat man's attitude of rather die than say a word gave Ogami a premonition that the victim was probably murdered by the Sumiyoshi gang. After finishing, Ogami took Hyoka to a pharmacy owned by Maria to bandage his wound. Ogami criticized Hyoka's combat skills as being so bad that he let the fat guy beat him up. However, Ogami did not know that Hyoka was just pretending to make him let his guard down. At the same time, 2 juniors in the Sumiyoshi gang learned that their brother Katsuya had been murdered by the Yamaguchi gang, so they immediately went to the Yamaguchi gang's territory to challenge him. This was a sign that a bloodbath was about to break out between the two gangs. The next day, Ogami learned about this, so he immediately took Hyoka to the Sumiyoshi gang's headquarters to check on the situation. This made Hyoka unable to believe that a police officer like Ogami was so close to the gangsters. The thug who bit off Yamaguchi's ear last night also had to kneel down and apologize to Ogami. Since the boss of the Sumiyoshi gang was in jail, Tokuda now took charge of the gang. He said he would lead his men to fight the Yamaguchi gang gang to get revenge. However, Ogami advised him to calm down. Ogami also said that he had thought of a way to put all of the Yamaguchi gang in jail. Ogami's words were so certain that Tokuda immediately listened. He even gave money to bribe Ogami. All of this made Hyoka extremely surprised. At first, Hyoka did not believe what the chief said. Hyoka did not expect that now he would witness Ogami breaking the law with his own eyes. However, Hyoka did not know that Ogami was trying to stop the bloody war between the two gangs, so he had to do so. After Hyoka returned, he quietly wrote in his diary about Ogami's crimes. When he had enough evidence, he would hand it over to the chief. At that time, Ogami would definitely be punished by the law. The next day, Ogami and Hyoka continued to investigate Katsuya's whereabouts. While in a deadlock, Ogami received a distress message from a friend named Taki. As soon as Ogami arrived, it turned out that Taki's wife was holding a gun and shooting Taki. The reason was because Taki dared to have an affair with his mother-in-law. Fortunately, Ogami stopped him in time, otherwise Taki would have been shot dead by his wife. After that, Ogami said that he was investigating the disappearance caused by the Yamaguchi gang. Taki said that 3 months ago, when he went to a motel with his mother-in-law, he saw some of the Yamaguchi gang's juniors kidnapping a young man there. After having a little clue, Ogami and Hyoka quickly went to the motel that Taki had pointed out. Ogami wanted to see the surveillance camera, but the manager was a member of the Yamaguchi gang. He said that without a search warrant, he absolutely would not agree. Omachi immediately entered the motel through the back door. Then he poured gasoline everywhere and used a lighter to set the house on fire. While everyone was attracted by the fire, Ogami and Hyoka brazenly went to the surveillance room to look for the camera footage recorded 3 months ago. Hyoka immediately stopped Ogami because this was an illegal act. Ogami angrily threw a punch. Hyoka also followed the reflex of a martial artist to counterattack and counterattack. Unexpectedly, Hyoka knocked Ogami unconscious on the spot. Hyoka sat down in a daze. At this time, he saw the video footage from 4 months ago. After that, Ogami and Hyoka immediately returned to the police station. Through the camera footage, they saw the entire process of Katsuya being kidnapped by the fat man and a group of people. However, this evidence was not enough to convict them of killing Katsuya. In order not to reveal any clues, Ogami decided not to arrest them right now. After all, the case had made a new breakthrough. Ogami was very happy, but Hyoka still could not understand why he was so reckless. He broke into people's houses without permission, then set fire and stole. Any crime could land Ogami in jail, but he didn't care. At this time, in the Yamaguchi gang, the incident of a gang member's ear being bitten off made the gang extremely angry. They decided to start a new challenge. A high-ranking Yamaguchi boss named Lee Shin brought people to cause trouble at the Sumiyoshi gang's bar. Lee Shin openly wanted to do something shady with the manager of this nightclub. Ozawa Nijiro witnessed with his own eyes that his lover was about to be taken by another man, so he was extremely angry and wanted to rush forward, but he was stopped after the bad thugs were about to leave the bar. Ozawa was extremely heartbroken when she saw Nijiro sacrificing his life to protect her. At the same time, Hyoka was on his way home when he suddenly encountered a passing rainstorm. At this time, opposite Hyoka was Nurse Maria, who was in the same situation. The two ran to Maria's house to take shelter from the rain. After that, they drank a few cans of beer to drown their sorrows. Maria asked Hyoka to stay here tonight. However, Hyoka had never been in love before, so he seemed shy. He didn't have enough courage, so he went out to buy a few more cans of beer. It turned out that he was a member of the Sumiyoshi gang. After he learned that Nijiro was shot dead, he was determined to take revenge. He shot at the Yamaguchi gang's office to get revenge. When Ogami heard the news, he immediately ran over. Ogami was extremely angry and scolded Hyoka. Ogami was trying to convince the Sumiyoshi gang that he would capture Yamaguchi's men so that war would not break out. But Hyoka's act of capturing them ruined Ogami's plan. Now Ogami didn't know what to say to the Sumiyoshi gang. After this, a bloody war between the two gangs would would definitely break out. Ogami was helpless, so he had no choice but to go to the prison to visit the head of the Sumiyoshi gang. Ogami tried to convince the other side with his feelings. Ogami hoped that he would come out to stop his underlings so that war wouldn't break out. Ogami promised that if he was given a little more time, he would definitely make the Yamaguchi gang pay. After the boss agreed, Ogami and Hyoka went to the Sumiyoshi gang to apologize for Hyoka arresting the wrong person. Tokuda was extremely angry. He gave Ogami 3 days to get the Yamaguchi gang's people into prison. Otherwise, he would immediately start a war. Blood debt must be paid with blood. After they left, Hyoka couldn't help but ask Ogami that if they didn't have any evidence of the Yamaguchi gang's crimes, how could they put them in jail in 3 days? Ogami tiredly said that if there was no evidence, they would create evidence. Besides, Hyoka was still secretly collecting evidence of Ogami's crimes in collusion with the mafia. The next day, Hyoka went to see the chief and showed him all the diaries and recordings of Ogami's negotiations with the mafia. However, the chief wasn't surprised at all. He just told Hyoka to keep an eye on it. The chief said that the police suspected Ogami of being involved in the massacre of the Yamaguchi and Sumiyoshi gangs. 14 years ago, a boss of the Yamaguchi gang was brutally murdered, but they didn't know who did it. The police suspected that it was Ogami. However, to convict him, evidence was needed. It was a diary where Ogami wrote down everything that happened. The next day, Ogami learned that the Sumiyoshi gang's boss, Lee Shin, had caused the incident. So he did something shady with Ozawa, right in the middle of the bar. He even killed Ozawa's boyfriend. Lee Shin had a crush on Ozawa. That's why Ogami told Ozawa to use a honey trap to lure Lee Shin into a trap. This plan worked. Lee Shin was a womanizer, so he quickly fell into the trap. Lee Shin couldn't help but start taking off all his clothes. At this time, Ogami and Hyoka rushed in. Ozawa accused Lee Shin of raping her. This crime is extremely serious in Japan and no one can forgive it. However, Lee Shin would rather die than tell the truth. Ogami immediately used drastic measures, tying Lee Shin's hands and feet to the bed like a coon. Then Ogami put on gloves and took a knife to prepare to torture Lee Shin. Ogami was extremely cruel. He started cutting Lee Shin with a knife. Finally, Lee Shin couldn't stand the torture, so he admitted to killing Nijiro. Katsuya was killed by his gang at a pig farm in the suburbs. Ogami and Hyoka were immediately present at the pig farm. Ogami only looked into the eyes of the pig farm manager, and Ogami immediately knew that he was high on drugs. As Ogami predicted, after a while of searching, Ogami and Hyoka found the drugs that he had hidden in his room. Ogami did not hesitate to take this manager to the police station. When he got back to the police uniform, Ogami laughed loudly. Ogami wanted to find out where Katsuya's body was buried, so he continued to let the manager know what torture was. If he did not confess, Ogami would send him to hell. Hyoka wanted to call his superiors because Ogami's method of forcing confession was too cruel. Ogami's actions violated professional ethics. However, other colleagues immediately stopped Hyoka because they all knew that Ogami's actions were a bit extreme, but this was the fastest and most effective way. When Hyoka picked up the phone, Ogami came out from inside and said that Katsuya's body was buried on a nearby deserted island. Hyoka quietly put down the phone. Immediately, the police sent special forces by boat to the deserted island. Ogami not only brought many people, but also brought along special dogs. The police dogs quickly found the burial site. Just like that, they dug up a skeleton. Sure enough, it was Katsuya's skeleton. Ogami happily brought the skeleton back to the police station. They only needed to do a DNA test to have enough evidence. Ogami would personally take action to put the thugs of the Yamaguchi gang in jail. Thanks to this, Ogami was able to fulfill his promise of 3 days to the Sumiyoshi gang. However, before Ogami could do anything, he was arrested by the police. It turned out that the chief was a spy of the Yamaguchi gang. He learned of Ogami's plan through the tapes Hyoka gave him. He used the evidence of Ogami's crime to order Ogami's urgent arrest. Fortunately, Ogami had more achievements than crimes, so he was only dismissed and handed over the case to someone else to investigate. So the 3-day deadline had passed and the Yamaguchi gang's members had not been arrested. Moreover, Ogami was still writing a self-criticism report. He could not arrive at the meeting place on time. Ogami knew that the situation had become difficult. But things did not go as he had planned. The Sumiyoshi gang did not hesitate and immediately started the battle. Ogami was extremely sad because all his efforts had failed. However, Ogami told Hyoka that he did not understand why the chief had evidence of his crimes in the past. These words made Hyoka extremely worried. Now Tokuda of the Sumiyoshi gang no longer trusted Ogami. In order to stop this bloody war, Ogami had to find the boss of the Yamaguchi gang. Ogami had been active in the two opposing factions for many years, so he had many weaknesses of the gangsters in his hands. So Ogami decided to use it to threaten the Yamaguchi gang to stop the war. However, he was not afraid and instead set a condition that the Sumiyoshi gang had to compensate him with 10 million yen, and the Sumiyoshi gang had to retreat and give up their territory. However, this condition was no different from oppressing the Sumiyoshi gang, so Tokuda did not agree and immediately left. It seemed that all of Ogami's plans had completely failed. Ogami called Hyoka to the bar to talk and relieve his stress. Here, Ogami said that he knew the director was a member of the Yamaguchi gang. Previously, the director had received money from them, so he became a spy. Hyoka did not dare to say that he was an insider for the chief, but Hyoka also strongly advised Ogami not to continue the fight. He should surrender and go to jail to save his life. However, Ogami said that he had chosen this path, so he could not stop. Then Ogami smiled and left. The next day, the police had the results of the DNA test. The remains found on the deserted island were Katsuya's body, who was brutally murdered by the Yamaguchi gang. There was enough evidence, so the police immediately arrested those involved in this case to punish them by law. However, Ogami suddenly disappeared. Hyoka began to panic, and he suspected that Ogami was being hunted by the Yamaguchi gang. So Hyoka begged the chief to send someone to investigate. However, he completely ignored him. Previously, Ogami said that the chief was a member of the Yamaguchi gang, but Hyoka did not believe it. Now the chief's attitude made Hyoka suspicious. Hyoka desperately went to Ozawa's bar to drink. Ozawa gave Hyoka another package. Inside was Ogami's diary that Hyoka had been looking for all this time. Ozawa said that Ogami had specifically told her that if anything happened to Ogami, she should give this diary to him. Hyoka opened the diary. Each page contained all the intelligence information about the crimes of high-ranking officials at the police station. Hyoka did not understand why Ogami collected this evidence. Ozawa told Hyoka that he used this to ensure that he would not be fired, because Ogami was always worried that if one day he was no longer around, there would be no one to balance the underworld, and bloody wars would occur, causing innocent people to live in hardship. Moreover, Ozawa also said that in the massacre 14 years ago, the person who killed the Yamaguchi gang leader was not Ogami but Ozawa. The Yamaguchi gang leader was Ozawa's husband, but he was a cruel person without a conscience, so Ozawa was forced to kill her husband. However, Ogami did not arrest Ozawa. He even covered up the incident for her, because Ogami didn't want the baby in Ozawa's belly to be born in prison. These words made Hyoka understand everything. He suddenly laughed out loud, but it was a sad laugh. Hyoka collapsed. He flipped the diary to the last page. It recorded all of Hyoka's information. It turned out that Ogami had known for a long time that Hyoka was the director's spy, but he didn't say anything. Hyoka thought he was in control of everything, but it turned out that he was just a victim. It turned out that the director told Hyoka to get the diary so he could destroy the evidence of the crime. Hyoka always thought that what he always protected was justice, but it turned out that he was killing justice. However, he no longer had a chance to correct his mistake. The next morning, Hyoka received a call from the police station informing him that they had found Ogami's body. Hyoka quickly went to the scene. He raised his hand and lifted the white cloth. When Hyoka saw Ogami's body, he felt his heart tighten. He couldn't breathe anymore. He almost fainted on the spot. A man who had never married in his life had sacrificed himself to stop the gang wars. Now Ogami had died so tragically. The autopsy report on Ogami quickly came back. A lot of pig feces were found in his stomach. His abdomen had been stabbed dozens of times. This was similar to the way the gangsters had killed Katsuya. Hyoka immediately went to the pig farm in the suburbs. He frantically searched the dirty pigsty. Hyoka could almost imagine how Ogami had been killed there. His hatred grew stronger and stronger. Finally, he found Ogami's lighter in the pile of pig feces. This lighter was bought by Ogami and Hyoka at a convenience store. Hyoka lost control. Hyoka grabbed the pig herder. He was also one of the people who had killed Ogami. Luckily, an old man stopped Hyoka. Otherwise, the murder would have happened. Back home, Hyoka opened Ogami's diary. Hyoka saw Ogami's daily comments about him and couldn't hold back his tears. Actually, Ogami had always secretly cared for Hyoka every minute and every hour when they worked together. Hyoka hated that he didn't realize it sooner, so he just hugged the diary and cried. Hyoka secretly swore that he would definitely avenge Ogami. The next night, the Yamaguchi gang held a party for their high-ranking spies. Of course, the police chief was also there. He was eating like a starved person. Hyoka was also there. He immediately opened the door and let the Sumiyoshi gang members in through the back door. Under Tokuda's leadership, the hunt officially began. At this moment, Hyoka immediately turned his back. Hyoka took action to capture Tokuda. Tokuda also didn't expect Hyoka to dare to do that to him. Since then, the underworld has once again returned to peace. Hyoka became the second Ogami. Hyoka didn't use the evidence in the diary that Ogami left behind to bring the director and other officials to light, but he used it to threaten them to continue to balance the underworld. Hyoka did what Ogami did. The movie ends here. What do you think about this movie? Please leave a comment below to let us know. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again.